Mom didn't cry when the bank app blinked to 0. She pressed her lips together the way school secretaries do when a parent is being difficult, slid her phone across the table, and showed me my father's face. 2 margaritas, a neon skyline, a Facebook check-in that read, Vegas, baby. He looked 20 years younger, standing next to the woman who wasn't my mother. The second notification landed before the ice in Mom's glass melted. Outgoing wire approved. Then another new account added. I took a breath, put the phone down, and straightened the stack of mail by the salt shaker. 6 hours, Mom, I said. That's all I need. I didn't mean force. I meant paper. Process. The kind of work that doesn't show up in movies, but does show up in court. We wouldn't chase him to Las Vegas. We'd make sure Las Vegas couldn't help him. The kitchen clock in Mom's bungalow ticks a little loud. I'd never noticed it until that afternoon when the rest of the room went quiet. The dishwasher hummed, the furnace kicked once, and the sun on the linoleum looked like it always had bright, ordinary nothing in it that said, your life just changed. Mom set the printout on the table like it was breakable. It was the joint account summary, yesterday's balance circled in blue pen, today's balance circled in the same pen, a line drawn between them as if to prove the math wasn't lying. Under it, a single-line item with more zeros than either of us had seen on a withdrawal. Wire out, Nevada, first. 419-1. I called the number. She said softly. They told me if I didn't authorize it, I should go down to a branch. You called the fraud line. I called the one on the back of the card, she said, and then her face folded just a little. Claire, I don't know what to do. I'm 34. Marine Logistics Officer reserve status now, but the habits don't wash off. Lists, timelines, quiet. I pulled the yellow legal pad from Mom's catch-all drawer, the one with spare keys and birthday candles, and wrote, Hour 0 at the top. Drink some water, I said. She did. Her hand shook. Mom isn't a dramatic person. She balanced the lunchroom ledger at the elementary school for 27 years and never lost a nickel. She still writes checks for the property tax because she likes seeing the stub go in the box. When my dad Earl started talking last winter about unlocking equity and making our money work, she bought a book about annuities from a man with a belt buckle and didn't open it. The phone still face up on the table, lit again. The Facebook picture refreshed, tiny hearts floating over my father's grin. Tanya, the woman from the gym. She's just a friend. Linda leaned into him tan and confident. Their caption had a little airplane emoji and a little green money bag. People we knew had left comments. So fun and you deserve it, and one, wait what, from a church lady who would later pretend she hadn't seen it. Mom turned the phone over. The screen went black. I wrote bank on the pad and underlined it. Then title county. Then James, the only lawyer I know by his first name, a Marine buddy who traded camis for suits and never lost his habit of returning calls. Claire, Mom said. He took it. All of it. She glanced toward the hallway, toward the framed picture of our old house on Maple Street, the one we sold when Dad said the mortgage was too big for people his age. He'd bought this smaller place with a yard out back where he said he'd plant tomatoes and never did. I nodded. I see it. Do we call him? We will if we have to, after we know what we're saying. She watched me write. The edge of the paper caught a tiny shine of sunlight from the sink. Outside, the neighbor's mower started up life, going on, unaware. I put ID theft with a question mark and then crossed the question mark out. Duress would be more accurate if we needed the word. Banks listen when you say it, even if nobody's 85 yet. Do we need the marriage certificate, Mom asked, standing already reaching toward the hall closet where she keeps a shoebox of documents. The deed. Your father kept saying my name should be on it and then never took me down there to add it. Let's get the box, I said, and your tax bill, and the last time the assessor sent anything. She moved like a person who's trying not to hurry and hurries anyway. The closet door rasped. She came back with a shoebox, a manila envelope stamped assessor on the corner, and the blue folder where she stores things she doesn't want to lose. We spread it all out. It looked like work. That calmed her some. The printer on the side table still had paper in it from the recipe for zucchini bread I'd printed for her last week. I used it to make copies, the bank summary, the Facebook check-in, the page from the tax bill with the parcel number. I slid each copy into a plastic sleeve because sleeves make people in offices take you seriously. Claire, she said again, how did this happen? Slowly, I said, and then all at once. I didn't tell her about the nights I'd noticed Dad's texts, flipping face down when I walked into the room, or the seminars on the counter with words like flip and cash in big red letters. I didn't tell her about the way he shrugged when I mentioned the roof needing a patch, you can finance a roof, or about the new jeans he'd bought on a Tuesday, a size smaller, with a wallet chain that made him look like somebody else. There's a moment when the truth stops being useful. We were past it. Do you think he'll come back? She asked so quiet I almost pretended I didn't hear. I think he'll need something, I said. Money, paper, and when he needs it, I want our side to be who he has to ask. She breathed out. It wasn't a sob, exactly. More like a sound you make when you put a heavy box down and it doesn't break. I wrote our zero bank and circled it. Here's what we're doing first, I said. And I laid it out like I was briefing a team. We call the bank and put a review flag on the account for out-of-pattern transfers. We attach your statement that you didn't consent to new wires. We request verbal verification for any further outgoing wires from both owners, not just one. We ask for a case number. Mom nodded. She sat up straighter. Then we freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus. We'll add a 1-year fraud alert. That keeps anyone from opening a new line in your name while we're sorting this. What about the house, she asked, hand going to the assessor envelope like it was warm. We're not letting title get clean, I said. If anybody tries to record a deed, a power of attorney, a refinance, there'll be a note sitting on the parcel telling them to look me in the eye first. She blinked. Can we do that? We can give every person along the assembly line a reason to slow down, I said. People make bad choices fast. Paper makes them slow. The clock ticked. I picked up the phone, dialed the bank, and said representative to the robot woman 3 times in a row. When a human answered, I explained slowly, using the words that matter. Joint owner. Out-of-state wires. Duress. Review. 2-party verbal verification. The woman on the line didn't argue. She asked for Mom's name and the last 4 of her social, and then read a disclaimer about recorded calls. When she gave us a case number, I wrote it at the top of the page, bank case. Yashimi or de 16, 2034. Do I need to talk to him? Mom asked when I hung up. Not unless you want to, I said. You did fine. We filed the case number with the other papers, and I snapped the binder rings shut. The sound felt good. I poured Mom another half glass of water and drank mine. The fridge kicked on and off. The world kept pretending it was Saturday. 6 hours, she said, like she was checking if I'd meant it. 6, I said. This first part takes 1. The rest is county and calls. If we do it right by the time he asks Las Vegas for more help, Las Vegas will have to ask us first. She looked at me the way she did when I graduated OCS and came home thinner and surer. You always were good with a list, she said. Lists work, I said. We gathered the copies into a cheap plastic folder, and I wrote, Linda Morgan Hold on the front with a black Sharpie from the junk drawer. I tucked Mom's original documents back where they belonged. People lose originals on days like this. I wasn't going to let us. The phone buzzed on the table. A new email. Subject line, heads up house stuff. It was from Tanya Reed, the name I'd seen on Dad's phone more than once, sent to Mom's address as if they were friends planning a potluck. Inside a single line might be some paperwork coming through. No big deal. Earl will explain when he gets back. Isid X. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. She tapped the phone face down again like it burned. We're not answering that, I said. She shook her head. No. I put my palm flat on the folder, felt the slight texture of the plastic. I thought of my dad in a hotel 4 states away, ordering room service on money that used to buy my mother's groceries, telling a woman who knew better that he was finally doing something for himself. I thought about how that story sounds to a person who wants to believe it. Outside, the mower cut off. A dog barked twice. The day slid forward indifferent. I drew a line under our 0 and wrote our 1 credit chalk county. Eat something, I said. Then we'll go to work. Mom stood open the bread box and took out the loaf she keeps for toast and emergencies. She buttered 2 slices she didn't taste and set a plate between us. When she sat back down, her hands were steady. "We don't chase him to Vegas, do we?" she said, half a question, half a memory of my words. "No, I said and I meant it. We make sure Vegas can't help him." Mom ate the toast because I told her to. Butter without taste. Half a slice left on the plate like a bookmark. I slid the plastic folder toward me and opened my laptop on the corner of the table, where the laminate is chipped from a Thanksgiving pan 20 years ago. "Phone on loud," I said. "If the bank calls, we answer." She nodded and set the cell beside the salt shaker like it was part of the place setting. I called James first. He still answers on the second ring like he's in a command tent and not a law office over a strip mall nail salon. "Claire, we've got a situation," I said. I gave him the facts the way we were taught, to give a 9-line joint account out-of-state wires, Facebook check-in, new friend from the gym. Mom's not on the deed, but she's the joint owner of the account, Dad talking equity for months. "Okay," he said. Paper rustled on his end. "First, don't chase him across state lines. That's a good way to lose the weekend and the plot. Second, expect you won't get every dollar back fast. Banks move slow when they're supposed to. Third, you can make the next thing he tries harder." "That's the plan," I said. "I'll email you a 1-pager, he said. Checklist fraud alerts, freezes recorded owner affidavit to cloud title notice to the big 3 title companies call to county recorder and assessor. You want someone to pause when they go to push buttons." He paused. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "Your mom?" "She will be." "Copy," he said. "Call me if someone says no." I hung up and opened Mom's email. She keeps it tidy subject lines like church bake sale and book club Tuesday. I searched bank and alert and found the first text that had buzzed while we were still looking at Vegas outgoing wire approved. The second said, "New beneficiary added." I took screenshots, saved them to a folder named Linda Hold on my desktop, and backed that up to a cloud drive I pay for because I don't like being surprised. "Do we need my social?" Mom asked. "It's in the blue folder if they ask." "They'll ask," I said. "We'll give it to the bank and the bureaus, not to anyone who calls us out of the blue." She nodded like she was memorizing a line for a play. I pulled a notebook toward me, and because I knew we'd need it, wrote the words, "timeline of events." I put down exact times when the Facebook post went up, when the first text hit, when we called the bank to give the people on the other end something to pin to. People in offices relax when you do their work for them. Then I took a breath and started the freeze. Equifax first, because their website was the last one I'd used when Mom's school had that phishing scare 2 summers ago. Security questions. Mom's first car, the street she grew up on, the name of a bank she's never used. I read them out loud, and she answered without looking at me, as if eye contact would make it less true. We set a pin for the freeze, and I wrote it on a yellow sticky, then wrote, "Do not email" next to it, and stuck it inside the folder where only we would see it. Experian and TransUnion next. 3 sites, 3 freezes. 1-year fraud alert layered on top because alerts travel further than freezes sometimes. I printed the confirmation pages and slid them into sleeves. "You've done this before," Mom said. "Practice," I said. "Scammers tried your district last year. I taught the PTA how to say no." That lifted a corner of her mouth. Not a smile. A memory of one. I backed out of the browser and opened the bank app. We couldn't undo what was gone, but we could add friction to whatever came next. Under security and travel, I toggled travel restrictions to require verbal verification for any out-of-state wires, added Mom's phone as the primary number for code confirmations, and deleted Dad's email as a recovery option. I set daily wire limits to the lowest allowed and pushed save. "Will he get a notice?" Mom asked. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. Even if he does, it just tells him we're paying attention." She folded her hands, smoothed a wrinkle in the tablecloth, and let them rest there. Her wedding ring looked too big all of a sudden, like it belonged to someone with thicker fingers and fewer lines. We didn't talk about my father then. We didn't list his good years or his bad ones or the way he'd started buying hair product and talking about cap rates like he'd invented them. We didn't mention Tanya by name. There are moments when you can talk a thing better or you can fix a thing faster. We were choosing the second. When the freezes were done, I opened a tab for the county recorder. The site looks like the internet did 15 years ago. Pale blue links and boxes with too much text, but the search worked. I typed in Mom's parcel number from the tax bill and waited for the page to spit something back. Anything, Mom asked. Nothing new recorded, I said. That's good. What would we see? A quit-claim deed transferring to someone else. A power of attorney with your name spelled wrong. A mortgage or home equity document you didn't sign. She went a little paler. He can do that without me. He can try, I said. People file things. Clerks record them. Title companies insure them. We just give each step a reason to hesitate. Can we tell them to stop? We can put a note in the file, I said. We can record our paper. I called the recorder's general line. The music on hold was the kind of song you forget as soon as it ends. When a human voice picked up and said, "Recorder's office." Ruiz speaking, I kept it simple, polite, and slow. I gave her Mom's name, the parcel number, the fact of a fresh police incident number, once we filed it online, and our intent to record an owner affidavit that Mom does not consent to any transfer, refinance, or power of attorney recording without her present and verified ID. Mrs. Ruiz breathed into the phone like she'd heard versions of this before. "We can't block all filings," she said. "People bring what they bring. But if you record an affidavit and it's indexed to the parcel, a title company will see it on search. They may pause and ask questions." "That's what I want," I said. "We have a template," she said. "It's not legal advice. It's just a form where the owner states facts." "Facts are good," I said. She told me how to e-file it, how to attach Mom's ID, how to reference the parcel exactly as it appears on the tax bill. I wrote the instructions twice and read them back to be sure. When she offered her direct extension, I wrote Ruiz recorder and her number on the top of the page like a medevac frequency. I emailed James the template and got a red check mark back in under a minute. "Use this language, attach the incident, Wes Arson when you have it. CC the 3 title companies in town that close most resi deals. I'll draft for you in 10. I closed my eyes and pictured the flow like a logistics map. Boxes moving down a belt. Banker, recorder, title, each one with a hand hovering over a button, each one willing to stop if the light turns from green to yellow. Mom went to the hall closet and came back with the blue folder. She set it between us and opened it like a book. Marriage certificate, her social security card in a sleeve, my birth certificate, the last homestead form Dad never filed, the property tax bill with her neat check marks where she'd verified the numbers against last year's. The pen in her hand scratched softly as she underlined the parcel number and wrote "Filed affidavit" next to it in her tidy school secretary print. I logged onto the police department's online portal and filed the kind of report that gets you an incident number. Suspected financial exploitation, out of pattern wires, elder duress concerns, though she's 62 and nobody's calling her elderly to her face, intent to cloud title via owner affidavit. I uploaded the bank screenshot and the Facebook check-in because even if it sounds ridiculous, documentation is documentation. At the end, a screen popped up with a number that didn't mean anything to anyone except the person at the other end who would pull the file next week. I printed that page and slid it into a sleeve too. "Do we call him now?" Mom asked. She wasn't whispering anymore, just quiet. "Not yet," I said. "He's going to try something else, and I want that something to land on paper that says no." She took a breath and let it out. "What if he gets mad?" "He will," I said. "People who take what isn't theirs get mad when the world tells them no." We took 5 minutes to stand at the sink and rinse the butter plate and listen to the pipes clatter in the wall. The ordinary sound of water going where it should go helped. I dried. She put the plate back in the cupboard in the spot it always sits left of the mixing bowls. When we sat again, I opened Mom's phone bill and checked the account recovery settings. I turned off location sharing she'd left on for family, which still included my father out of habit. I changed her email recovery backup to an address Dad didn't know. I checked her social media privacy and pulled friends of friends back to friends because people like Tanya love an audience and I wasn't giving her our porch. The laptop chimed. An email from James. Subject line, owner affidavit. Use this. 2 paragraphs. Straight facts. No heat. He'd CC'd 3 title companies with a note that said, owner disputes any conveyance or encumbrance absent in-person verification. See attached incident. Waivers. I uploaded the affidavit through the county's portal. An automated reply hit the inbox in under a minute, received pending index. Mrs. Ruiz's extension sat next to the phone if it got stuck like a lifeline you keep within reach and hope you won't need. Do you want coffee? Mom asked. After we call the assessor, I said. She smiled a small exhausted smile. Of course, she said. The county first. While we waited on hold, I wrote Tanya Reed contact in the margin and drew a line through it. We weren't reaching out. We weren't giving anyone a chance to spin a story about misunderstandings and paperwork, and we'll fix it when Earl gets back. We'd let the button pushers see the yellow light and touch nothing until they'd talk to us. The hold music clicked off. A new voice came on and said a name I didn't catch over the line. I gave her the parcel. I told her I wanted to confirm the mailing address for tax notices and that no one had filed a forwarding order. She checked. We were fine. I asked how long it takes for a recorded affidavit to show on the parcel. She said usually by end of day. I thanked her, like she'd handed me back something I thought I'd lost. When I hung up, Mom poured coffee into the 2 mugs that say, Best Mom, because my father bought them on a Mother's Day when I was 12 and forgot I was real and bought 2. 6 hours? She said again, not to push, just to mark the time like a nurse charting a dose. 6, I said. The phone buzzed against the table. A new email. Credit Karma new inquiry on your report. I opened it and read the small type. Reed and Spencer Realty soft pull. Not a loan, not a mortgage, a look. We're not the only ones working today, I said. Mom wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at me over the steam. Her face had color again. What do we do? We finished the list, I said, and then we let the paperwork. I wrote hour 0030 at the top of the next page and drew a box around it. The boxes weren't for show. Boxes make people in offices behave. Hour 0030 bank locks friction everywhere. I opened the bank security settings again and went line by line like a pre-flight. 2-factor primary to Mom's cell backup to my Google Voice that Dad doesn't know. New external account set to cooling off review. Anything added today requires manual confirmation by an employee before a first transfer. Outgoing wires minimum notice set to 24-hour delay unless both owners verify by phone. The system called it a review window. I called it a wedge. Zelle, instant transfer. Paused. Debit card controls, geofence to Washington and Idaho. Out of state requires a tap in the app that only Mom can make. Alerts turned everything on new device password change. Beneficiary added wire initiated card present in Nevada. I added my email to receive a copy of each alert because people read faster when they know they're not the only ones reading. Feels like a lot, Mom said, watching the toggles slide. It is, I said. That's the point. Good people don't notice friction. Thieves do. The bank's fraud team called back sooner than I expected, a man with a calm voice who introduced himself as Mr. Thompson and read our case number like he'd already made a folder. I put him on speaker and moved the yellow pad closer so I could write while he talked. I see 2 large outgoing wires processed earlier today, he said. Those are posted. I can't pull them back without the receiving bank's cooperation. I've sent an interbank recall request. No promises. Understood, I said. What about anything new? I've placed a high-risk flag on your profile, he said. Any new out-of-state wire will require both owners to complete a callback with our team. We'll ask control questions only the account owners would know. If we can't verify the transfer, we'll time out. Verified by voice, not text, I said. Correct. I looked at Mom. She nodded once, small but steady. I'm also seeing a new external account added today, he said, ending in 4921 Nevada first. I've quarantined it. We won't allow transfers to any newly added recipients for 72 hours without a branch-level override. Thank you, I said. Please add a note to the profile: possible undue influence. Joint owner asserts non-consent. I'll note financial exploitation concern, he said. It triggers extra review, even if the customer isn't technically elderly. He asked to record Mom's statement. She gave it like she was reading a recipe: slow, exact, no flourishes. When he finished the script and gave us a second internal reference number, I wrote it down and underlined it twice. If he tries to reset the password, Mom asked. He'll need your two-factor, Thompson said. And I just removed his email as a recovery address per your request. You'll get any alerts. Good, I said. We're okay for now. You're better than most, he said like he'd seen the opposite all day. I'll call if I see anything move. We thanked him and hung up. I drew a heavy line under hour 0030. Hour 031 at 00, document what we can't get back yet. We exported the last 90 days of account activity and printed the PDF. I circled the wires and wrote, posted recall sent in the margin, so the future wouldn't make me pretend I'd forgotten. I printed the beneficiary added notice with the timestamp and the IP address. Thompson had said he could see it server side, but I like my own copies. I stapled them into sleeves, one packet for Bank 1 to ride with the police incident when I filed it. Mom breathed easier when the printer made noise. Paper is proof that someone besides you saw a thing. I checked the login history and wrote down the last 3 IPs. One of them started with 66.249, a mobile network I recognized. One said LVG in the location column, which is how banks say Las Vegas without saying it. Mom closed her eyes and opened them again. I know she said, though, I hadn't said anything. We ate the rest of the toast because a person should finish what's on the plate when they're about to go fight forms. Hour 1, A0130 police incident, not drama. The city's online reporting portal looks like it was built by a patient person. I filled in the boxes. Financial exploitation, undue influence suspected, joint account, out of pattern wires, out of state, joint owner not present, non-consent asserted, bank case, 16 U2 I attached the screenshot of the Facebook check-in, not because it was a crime to be tacky, but because it helped an overworked clerk place a date, a face, and a location with the numbers. At the end, the system spit an incident number into the screen. I copied it into the affidavit draft James had sent, pasted it into the email to the title companies we'd CC, and wrote it in big letters on the folder, PD Inc. and Hamarnas 2025-0417. Do they come out? Mom asked, eyeing the street like a car might already be rolling our way. Not today, I said. But next week, when a detective triages a stack of papers, ours will have numbers and names and screenshots. It goes closer to the top when it looks finished. She nodded. The nod had more belief in it than the last one. I sent a quick email to James incident filed. Affidavit next. Thompson at bank quarantined, new recipient, dual voice required. He replied with a single word he has always loved: copy. Hour 1, 32, 0 perimeter check. We set up USPS informed delivery for Mom because addresses tell stories. No change of address had been filed. I made a note to check again tomorrow. I logged into Mom's utilities and made sure the email on file was hers. Not a household address Dad still read. I turned off paperless tax bills so the county would send physical mail again. Paper in a blue box gets attention when email gets lost. On social media, we pulled her settings all the way back to friends, not friends of friends. I added two-factor to her email because password resets go there first. I took photos of her driver's license and social security card per Mrs. Ruiz's instructions and scanned them through the app James recommended so the recorder would accept the images as clear and legible. The kitchen smelled like coffee and printer toner. The clock ticked. The phone face down on the table buzzed once and went quiet. Outside, a delivery truck squeaked its brakes and lumbered away. The world didn't care that we were drawing lines around a life. It never does. You draw them anyway. Do you want me to call him? Mom asked. No, I said. I want him to call someone else and hear the word no from a stranger in a tie. She looked at the folder now thicker than it had been an hour ago and put her hand on it the way she used to put her hand on my shoulder in the church parking lot when she didn't want to make a scene. The gesture meant enough. It still did. The laptop chimed. An email slid into Mom's inbox from a name neither of us knew. Notifications@countysearch.net. Subject line, parcel inquiry. Logged 11:57 a.m. I clicked. A one-line notice. Third-party title search requested. For parcel Babrir 11327 08 114 tier. Someone shopping, I said. Us, Mom asked. Not us. I glanced at the corner of the screen. 1:57 p.m. We were inside the window right where we wanted to be. I wrote our 2 title I's on file and put a check mark next to it. Next, Mom said. Next, we make sure that when they touch title, I said they touch us. I flipped to a fresh page and drew 3 boxes in a column left margin, neat as drill recorder title assessor. Then a 4th smaller box at the bottom AG tip line. Hour 3. Recorder put paper where eyes can't miss it. Mrs. Ruiz answered on the second ring like she was expecting us. It's Morgan again, I said. Owner affidavit uploaded. Parcel number 1327-08-114. I see it, she said, keys clacking. Image quality is good. Driver's license is legible. You reference the police incident number? Yes. Okay, a beat. I'll kick it to indexing. You'll get an instrument number once it's live. It won't block filings, but any title search will pull it. That's what we want, I said. Also, she added, voice turning a shade warmer. If anyone comes to record a power of attorney, our clerks have a script they'll ask to copy IDs, and they'll compare signatures against anything on file. We're not detectives, but we can slow people down. Slowing is winning today, I said. I put a check next to recorder. The pen left a shiny line that dried while she confirmed our email. Hour 3:30. Title warned the button pushers. James's email went out to 3 addresses with names like closings, city title, and orders first town. Subject line, tight owner, affidavit parcel, Mabri 132708 1 Nimor, do not insure conveyance, I encumbrance without in-person verification. He attached the stamped affidavit once Mrs. Ruiz's automated reply hit received indexing. He CC'd me and Mom and added a single sentence that sounded like him in a courtroom. Owner will appear in person with government ID prior to any escrow opening or policy issuance. I watched the outbox counter turn to scent and felt something unclench under my ribs. Coffee now, Mom asked. While we call the assessor, I said. Hour 4. Assessor fixed the mail lock the address. A woman named Kelly at the assessor's office confirmed the mailing address on the tax roll was still Mom's bungalow. We haven't received a forwarding order, she said. If you ever do, please call us. We flag those for review during ownership changes. Can we switch tax bills back to paper, I asked. Not paperless. You just did, she said, and I heard keys click. You'll also get a postcard if any change of ownership statement is filed. It's meant to catch fraud. People read postcards. People do, I said, and underlined postcard in my notes because small things save big ones. When I hung up, Mom set a mug in front of me that said, Best Mom. She took the other one for herself. We let the steam hit our faces without speaking. The kitchen window made a small square of light on the table that crawled a half-inch as we watched it. Hour 4:30. Title replies start to land. City title wrote back, first affidavit received and indexed in our internal alert system. We will not open escrow on this parcel, absent owner in-person verification. Then, first town hold noted. If any file opens, we'll contact Ms. Morgan at this number before proceeding. The third American pioneer was slower, but the email finally popped at 4:42 p.m. flag placed. We require wet signatures with ID present if any instrument is offered. Mom exhaled like someone loosening a knot with her thumbs. Good people, she said. Good process, I said. People change. Paper doesn't. Hour 5. AG tip line put a badge on the folder. James sent a neat packet to the State Attorney General Consumer and Financial Protection email. Affidavit, incident number, bank case number screenshots parcel sheet. His subject line was his usual mix of modest and sharp potential undue influence. Attempted quick sale pipeline. Owner affidavit recorded. Please assign. An automated reply came back with a long string of numbers and a 3-letter code that meant it would route to financial crimes if a human agreed it smelled like more than a messy divorce. I don't expect a knock today, James said on a quick call. But if someone over there has seen this Reed and Spencer name before your packet floats to the top. What do we do while it floats? I asked. You eat dinner, he said, and you let the holds do their job. Hour 5, 15 perimeter check round 2. I opened to Find My panel and removed Dad from Mom's location sharing. I reset Mom's email recovery to a backup address Dad never had and printed out the new recovery codes, slid them into a sleeve and wrote, "Do not store online" across the top. I also looked at Mom's phone plan and turned off a little setting that let trusted devices approve sign-ins. People forget what they've trusted. We untrusted it. Mom watched the printer spit the last page like it was a sewing machine making a hem on a dress she wasn't sure she'd wear. Hour 5, 30, recorder pings were on the map. An email from Recorder e-Services arrived with more numbers than words. Instrument 2025-0417-00931. Owner affidavit indexed parcel 327081114 tier. There was a tiny PDF icon. I clicked it and saw Mom's name in 12-point type. Above the parcel description, the line we'd borrowed from James' owner, does not consent to conveyance encumbrance or power of attorney absent personal appearance with government ID, and the incident number tucked under it like a footnote. I printed 2 copies, one for the folder, one for the fridge under the magnet shaped like Idaho. Mom slid her finger over the print and didn't speak for a long time. Hour 5, 42, a ripple from Nevada. Mom's phone buzzed. Security alert attempted outbound wire manual review required. The sender line had bank fraud operations in it and Mr. Thompson's callback number. I answered and put it on speaker. Thompson. Claire Morgan, I said. We got an alert. We did too, he said. Out-of-state wire to the Quarantine Nevada account, same last 4 you gave me. Our system forced a callback. We're on voicemail loop with Mr. Earl Morgan. Will you require both voices, I asked, though I knew. We already are, he said. Our script asks for joint verification. If we don't get both the request times out. 30 minutes. Copy. He hesitated. I'll document this as a denied verification if we don't reach Ms. Linda within the window. Obviously, we have her right here. We're not approving, I said. Understood. I could hear the low murmur of other calls behind him. I'll note owner, present non-consent. Mom stared at the phone like it might hatch a bird. She didn't say a word. Hour 5:51, social media coughs up a clue. A neighbor, Marilyn, texted Mom a screenshot Tanya Reed had posted a Facebook story, 2 wine glasses clinking, and the caption paperwork day. Manifesting new beginnings. The location tag was Las Vegas Strip. 3 dots then, can't keep a good man down. Mom's thumb trembled once. Then she set the phone face down again like we'd practiced. We don't answer Facebook, I said. We answer paper. Hour 5:58. The belt catches. Email from City. Title FYI received preliminary inquiry from Spencer Realty for a pre-title search on your parcel. We returned with affidavit and hold notice. They acknowledged receipt. Spencer, I said aloud, not Reed. Different surnames, Mom said practical. Same circle. I put Spencer on the pad and boxed it in ink. Hour 6. The hinge hour. The kitchen felt like the minute before a storm when the air leans on the screens. The clock ticked loud enough to be a metronome. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at a truck that didn't deserve it. The phone rang. Not Mom's. The landline. We keep it for weather and memory. I let it ring once and then picked up. Morgan residence. Dad's voice. Thinner than usual, like the phone line had stretched him. Linda, I need you to. They're saying I have to. There's some kind of hold. It's ridiculous. Just tell them we approve the transfer. It's Claire, I said. A beat, then too bright. Claire Bear. Put your mother on. No, I said. You don't get to say no, he snapped. The brightness cracked. They're telling me they need both voices too. Look, it's a courtesy. I'm moving things around. For us. For Tanya, I said. Silence. Then a scrape like he'd put his hand over the receiver and was whispering to someone in the room. Muffled. She's being difficult. The other line chimed. Call waiting Mr. Thompson. I ignored it and let voicemail do its job. We already knew what he'd say timed out. Dad came back breathing fast. Claire, don't be childish. These are grown-up decisions. I need your mother to say yes to the bank. I heard need, I said. That's new. What did you do? He asked. And the tone wasn't a father's anymore. It was a man in a casino suddenly remembering the house always wins. Paper, I said. Process. The boring kind. You can't. I can, I said. And we did. There was another muffled aside, then a woman's voice in the background, Tanya flat with irritation. Just get it done, Earl. The timer on the stove left over from a soup Mom had made before the world tilted, clicked down the last 30 seconds of nothing. Somewhere a car door shut. The dog down the block stopped barking like it had decided the truck was fine after all. Dad's voice came back louder. Put your mother on the phone now. Mom shook her head once. Calm. Decided. No, I said again. He inhaled like he was about to say something cruel. Then his breath hitched, like he'd seen a number on a screen change the wrong direction. On my cell, Mr. Thompson's voicemail landed, with a little flag icon. Verification expired, outgoing wire, canceled recipient quarantined. I let the silence sit, let him hear our house breathe. Claire, he said, finally, smaller. What did you do? At exactly 6 hours, the first person to panic wasn't my mother. It was my father in Las Vegas when a banker told him no. The first call after the 6-hour mark wasn't from Dad. It was from Mrs. Ruiz. Recorder's office, she said. It's Ruiz. I wanted you to know we just received an e-filed power of attorney for your parcel. Name on the POA says Linda Morgan. Signature doesn't match what we have from your prior filings. Filed by who I asked. The submitter of record is a document service used by Spencer Realty, she said. We returned it pending in-person ID. We don't adjudicate disputes, but we can require the owner to appear when a signature looks off. That's enough, I said. Thank you for the call. I hung up and texted James Spencer attempted POA. Recorder kicked it for in-person ID. Their office touched it. He called me back before I set the phone down. Good, he said. They're moving. We'll keep them inside the lanes. What do you think their next play is? Open a soft file at title, he said. Float a preliminary report. If they can get a friendly escrow officer to say the word doable, they'll act like it's already done. Or they'll try an off-market quick sale to a cash buyer they already know. Under the cloud, people push paper and hope no one looks, he said. Today, people looked. At 7:12 p.m., Mr. Thompson left a voicemail with his tired, precise voice. Outgoing wire attempt canceled, dual verification, failed recipient remains, quarantine profile flags, sustained for 72 hours. He didn't add nice work, but the silence after the facts felt like approval. We ate soup while it was still hot and didn't say Dad's name. Mom rinsed the bowls, set them in the rack, and wiped the counter like she meant to keep the house, even if the world didn't. The next morning at 9:18, an email from City Title arrived. Pre-title inquiry received from Spencer Realty, returned with owner affidavit, hold notice. Their coordinator acknowledged. Attached was a thread, a polite title clerk reminding Spencer that no insurer would bind without in-person verification by Mom. At 10:03, the assessor mailed a postcard change of ownership statement received because the computer had seen the POA attempt and spit out a yellow card to the only address that mattered. A small thing doing big work. At 10:40, James pinged me, AG Financial Crimes wants the packet. Detective Hall. He added a number and says he's seen the fast flip names before. I called Detective Hall from the driveway. He answered with the voice of a man who keeps a legal pad in his glove box. Detective Hall. Claire Morgan, I said. My attorney sent you our file. Got it, he said. Paper sounded like it was being turned. Reed and Spencer. We've had complaints. Not enough to bring a case last time. This helps. What do you need? He asked for clean copies of the bank alerts, the recorder instrument number, and any interactions with title. He wanted the Facebook check-in too. He didn't need it for a crime, but juries understand pictures. I emailed what we had while we spoke. Don't confront, he said. If they move toward a sale, I want to see how they talk when they think no one's watching. No confrontations, I said. We're using paper. Good, he said. If they step into criminal, we'll be there. By noon, Mom's neighbor Marilyn texted over Ring camera footage from last night. Dad on our porch with a stack of glossy one-sheets he'd printed somewhere coming soon. Off-market opportunity, Tanya behind him. Wearing sunglasses after dark, handing one to a man who didn't live on our street. The footage had no audio. It didn't need it. It was proof of intent in pixels and porch light. At 1:27, an email from Daniel Spencer slid into Mom's inbox with a subject, "Quick consult, great opportunity," and a body that pretended we'd spoken. Linda swinging by with a photographer tomorrow morning to grab a few shots for our private list. Just light staging. We'll handle everything. No need to be home. Earl has keys. This is a win-win. D. Mom stared at the screen until the words stopped meaning anything. Then she looked at me. Do we reply? No, I said. We document. I forwarded the email to James and Detective Hall with one line attempting entry for photos without owner consent. Hall wrote back 5 minutes later, "If they come, do not block. Tell them to leave. Ask them to state their purpose. I'll have a unit nearby. Recorders and title are on hold. Sale can't happen, but I want them to say quiet parts out loud." "They're coming," I said to Mom. She put a hand flat on the counter and nodded once. No drama, just a yes. That night, I checked the security cameras I'd installed for Mom after a string of porch thefts last winter. Cloud storage, motion alerts, interior cams in the living room and kitchen video only. I'd turned audio off because some states hate the sound of their own laws. The lenses took in a quiet house. Mom's throw blanket folded just so the cut glass candy dish with mints. Nobody eats the framed kindergarten photo of me with bangs cut straight across by a woman who loved me and scissors in equal measure. "Do we sleep?" Mom asked. "We try," I said, "and we let them keep talking to their friends." We did sleep in the way women sleep when numbers and locks are doing a shift for them. They came at 9:42 a.m., later than Spencer promised, earlier than decent people with business cards. The photographer's hatchback rolled in first, then a silver SUV with Spencer Realty magnetized to the door. The last car was Dad's pickup, washed for the occasion. He parked like a man who believed he owned the concrete. I'd called James and Detective Hall at 8. James showed up around 9:20 in corduroy and court shoes. A thin brief the color of old walnuts under his arm. Hall didn't show up. He existed 2 corners over in an unmarked sedan with a partner who sipped coffee and read a paper copy of a report like it was 1998. "Ready?" James asked. "Paper's ready," I said. Mom had put on a blouse and the tiny cross she wore on field trip days when the kids were hard. She chose the tone a person uses for the church foyer when someone's borrowed a pie plate and not returned it. Spencer and the photographer walked up the path with a collapsible tripod like a flagpole. Tanya was all sunglasses and white teeth. Dad had on a new shirt with a stitched logo that suggested a company he didn't work for. They didn't knock. Dad used his key. I opened the door from the inside before the lock turned. "You don't walk into this house?" I said plain. Spencer blinked at me as if he hadn't expected someone to be behind the door of the house he planned to photograph. "Linda," he said, looking over my shoulder for my mother like he was checking for a clerk. "We emailed. This'll be quick." "Mrs. Morgan," I said. "And no." "Earl has authority," Tanya said, stepping forward. "We filed the papers." "You attempted to file," I said. "The recorder returned it pending in-person ID. The title companies have our affidavit and will not open escrow. Nothing happens here today." Dad pushed past subtle. Claire, don't make this hard. We're staging for a private list. I have buyers ready. It's smart money. We list at 470, take 420, smooth, close. He recited the numbers like they were scripture. I stepped back into the hallway so Mom could stand in her own doorway. She did small and solid chin level. No, she said. Spencer smiled in the way men smile when they think the word no is an opening argument. Ma'am, we're just doing photos. Paperwork's a formality. I handed him 3 sheets stapled in order the recorder instrument with the owner affidavit, the email from City Title stating no insurance without in-person ID, and a letter with a case number from Bank Fraud Operations summarizing the duress flag. Photos would be trespass, I said. Listing would be fraudulent. Conveyance would be uninsurable. The photographer shifted weight and looked at the sidewalk like it might offer a gig somewhere else. Tanya lowered her sunglasses. You don't have to be rude. I'm being accurate, I said. Out by the curb, Detective Hall stepped out of his sedan and walked up the sidewalk like a man with knees that had opinions. He didn't flash a badge because men who do this for a living don't lead with metal unless they need to. He stopped at the bottom step, polite as a neighbor. Morning, he said. Which of you is Daniel Spencer? Spencer turned charm already cocked. That's me. Can I help you? Detective Hall, he said. Attorney General's financial crimes. I'd like to ask a few questions about a power of attorney attempted for this property and your communications with title. Spencer's cheeks moved, then forgot what they meant to say. This is a civil matter, he said. Sometimes they start that way, Hall said. He held out a paper, a short letter on letterhead with a case number. We're documenting. Are you recording photos today without owner consent? No one said anything about Spencer began. We did, I said. Tanya stepped in with the brightness of a person who sells timeshares. We're happy to leave, she said quickly. This is clearly a misunderstanding. It's not, Mom said, and her voice had the firmness of a bell. Dad took a step forward and pointed at my folder. You think paper can stop business, Linda? We talked about this. We're downsizing. It's for us. Mom looked at him, the way women who know math look at a man explaining their budget from Las Vegas. You talked, she said. I didn't agree. Hall's partner had drifted up behind him and now lifted a tiny body cam as naturally as you adjust a tie. Sir Hall said to Dad, Are you attempting to sell this property without the owner's consent? Dad's eyes flicked toward the photographer and Spencer, and something in his mouth quivered before it decided where to land. This is staging, he said. Preliminary. It's just photos. Which require entry, which requires consent, Hall said. Do you have it? No one answered. Title doesn't need a badge, it needs a sentence, and Hall had brought both. A title rep from City Title pulled up, then Angela, mid-40s, purposeful ponytail, a stack of folders under one arm. She'd replied to our email last night and decided to come for clarity, which is what good people call trouble, before it spoils the carpet. I thought we might be meeting here, she said to me softly. Then to Spencer, louder, Your coordinator acknowledged the hold. We will not open escrow on this parcel. We haven't opened anything, Spencer said quickly. Angela raised one eyebrow. Your email says, soft open on prelim request 7342. That was exploratory. Spencer said, his smile now a thin cut. We explore a lot of things. Explore somewhere else, Angela said. Dad's phone rang. Las Vegas number. He stabbed at the screen, then hit speaker without thinking, like volume could push process. This is Bank Fraud Operations, a professional voice said. We're calling to complete dual verification for an outgoing wire to Nevada First. Yeah, Dad said. We approve. Sir, the voice said, calm as a nurse. We'll need to speak to both owners. You're speaking to me, Dad said. I'm a joint owner. Both owners, sir, the voice repeated. We're also required to inform you there is a financial exploitation flag on the profile. We cannot proceed without Ms. Linda Morgan's consent. All of us hallway stoop sidewalk could hear. Tanya's mouth flattened to a line. Spencer's photographer closed his tripod like a man folding a tent in the rain. Dad turned toward Mom, voice too loud now. Linda, just say yes. This is for us. Mom didn't look at him. She looked at the recorder instrument on the page in my hand with her name underlined, and then she looked at Detective Hall, who had not moved. "No," she said. There was a pause on the line that sounded like respect. Then the bank voice, "Verification failed. The outgoing wire will be canceled. Please visit a branch if you have questions." The call clicked off. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was public. Hall nodded once, as if a step had landed where he'd marked it on his pad. He turned to Spencer. "Mr. Spencer," he said, "I need to document your intent for today. Were you here to list and sell this home without the owner present?" Spencer's eyes did the math and came up empty. "We were gathering options," he tried. "Your email says, list at 470 years, take 420. I said, "You sent it to my mother, without consent." "Do you have that email?" Hall asked. "Yes," I said, and handed him the print. He read it, then slid it into a clear sleeve like I do, which made me like him more. "I'm going to ask you to leave now," Hall said to the group. "No entry today. Further contact goes through council or this office. If you attempt to re-enter without the owner's consent, uniformed patrol responds and we write the first report from a cruiser, not a porch." Tanya tugged at Dad's sleeve. "Earl," she said low and urgent, "let's go." He didn't move. He stared at me like he could still will a different story into the paper. "You did this," he said. "I stopped this," I said. "There's a difference. Families don't do this to each other. Families don't steal from each other," I said. "We're even on sentences now." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The photographer started down the walk in the careful backward steps of a man who wants to be gone without drawing attention to his back. Spencer followed with his tripod, then Tanya, who put her sunglasses back on to hide a face that had finally heard the word no. Dad came last key, still in his hand a piece of metal that no longer opened anything that mattered. They got into their cars and left slower than they'd arrived. Angela from City Title gave Mom a business card, with her cell written in pen, and said, "Call me for anything," and meant it. Detective Hall took 2 more notes, told me he'd be in touch, and walked back to the unmarked with his partner, who folded his newspaper and nodded like he'd enjoyed the ending. Inside the house was the same as it had been at 9:41 before the first tire touched our curb. The living room camera had captured them on the porch in crisp, silent video. The interior cams showed Mom and me in the hallway, my folder like a shield with staples. It was all ours. Mom sat at the table and put both hands around her mug, even though the coffee had gone cold. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's slowed," I said, "and we've got witnesses." The landline rang again and we let it. The answering machine picked up with the voice my father recorded in 2019 when he still liked hearing his own name announce our house. He didn't leave a message. An email from Angela arrived before we'd finished our cold coffee encounter documented. Parcel hold confirmed in our internal system. Video received. Will cooperate with AG. 5 minutes later, Hall wrote, "Preserve all footage, emails, texts. Subpoenas forthcoming. We're opening a case file." On the porch, the small square of light had moved half an inch down the table again. The clock ticked like it had in part 1. The dishwasher hummed for no one. The house exhaled. "Lunch?" Mom asked, because after process come sandwiches. "Lunch," I said. We ate standing up, not because we were in a hurry, but because some victories are easier to taste before you sit. When we sat finally, I wrote one simple sentence on the yellow pad. They walked into it. Detective Hall called the next morning. "Bring your folder," he said. "And your mother. We'll keep it short." The AG field office sits in a brick building that used to be an insurance company. The lobby had chairs that made you sit up straight and a coffee machine that sounded like a lawnmower when it worked. We signed our names on a clipboard. A woman at the desk gave Mom a styrofoam cup and a pen with State of Washington stamped in blue on the barrel. Hall led us into a room with a table that had been wiped so many times it had a dull shine. He clicked a small recorder on and said the date out loud. James arrived with his walnut brief and nodded like we were early, even though we were on time. "Tell me what you did," Hall said. I did. Slow. No adjectives. bank flags, two-party verification, recorder affidavit, title notices, assessor postcard. He didn't interrupt. He asked for copies. I laid them in order on the table. He slid them into a manila folder stamped FC 2504117. What about communications from Spencer, he asked. I handed over the email list at 470, take 420, and the screenshot of the power of attorney attempt bouncing back. He read them jaw-shifting once, like a man testing a tooth. Good, he said. We've drafted subpoenas for Spencer's office and his document service. We'll also pull recorder e-file logs. We want the what, do, when, where on that POA attempt. He looked at Mom. Mrs. Morgan, did you ever meet with Mr. Spencer or sign anything giving him authority? No, Mom said. I never met him before he tried to walk in my house. Noted, Hall said. James tapped his pen once. We'd also like the bank to preserve login IPs and the call recordings where they requested dual verification, he said. That goes to knowledge and intent. Hall nodded. We're already on it. On our way out, Hall stopped us at the doorway. One more thing, he said. If you receive any new contact emails, text cards on the door, forward them to me. We're building a picture. Copy, I said. The word came out of my mouth the way it used to on a radio. The bank recall didn't bring all the money back. It never does. But at 3:12 p.m., Mr. Thompson called to say $18,000 of the second wire had been returned by the receiving bank funds, not yet fully dispersed, he read. The first wire was gone. Cash withdrawn at a branch off the strip. He sounded almost apologetic when he said it. We'll chase the rest civilly, James said. Criminal has its lane. Restitution has ours. Mom nodded like a woman deciding between two grocery brands. We'll take what comes, she said. That night, Tanya posted another story, Haters Gonna Hate, and tagged no one. A neighbor sent it to Mom with an eye-roll emoji and a line, you handled that porch like a champ. Mom texted back thank you and set the phone down like it weighed less. 2 days later, Hall called again. We'll be serving subpoenas at Spencer Realty this afternoon. Not a search warrant, he said. First we ask. Do you want us there? I asked. No, he said. You've done enough for this chapter. He went anyway with a partner and a stack of papers clipped neat. Later, he told us Spencer tried charm, then offense, then a joke about how paperwork is for people without hustle. Hall didn't laugh. They left with copies of client intake forms, a POA template with Linda Morgan typed in the top line, and no signature below. A blank notary acknowledgement pre-stamped by someone who didn't appear, and an email thread between Spencer and a contact labeled Read T with attachments, our parcel sheet, our street view, and off-market buyers list. Notary James said, We'll want that name. We have it, Hall said. The stamp shows in the PDF metadata, even if the image is blank on print. Sloppy people leave trails. He sounded tired, not discouraged, the kind of tired that comes when a picture you suspected starts to fill in. On Thursday, City Title hosted a standing industry lunch, title reps, agents, loan officers, and Angela asked Mom if she could tell a 5-minute cautionary tale. Mom doesn't like microphones. She stood anyway, hands around a paper cup, and told a room full of people who move houses for a living that paper can be decent or it can be a crowbar. I'm Linda, she said. My husband tried to sell our home while he was in Las Vegas with his friend. My daughter filed 3 pieces of paper. That was enough for people to see me. She didn't say Spencer's name. She didn't have to. The room knew the type. After 3 escrow officers handed Angela their cards and said if any file hit their desk with our parcel, they'd call me before they touched a key. That's not procedure, one of them said. It is now, Angela replied. Friday morning, Hall asked if we'd consent to a controlled communication and undercover AG investigator posing as a cash buyer on Spencer's list. No wires, no entrapment, just ears in a room while people say what they say when they smell money. Where I asked, a coffee shop, he said. Neutral ground, public. We won't use your house. We signed consent forms that said we understood and we wouldn't show up. Then we didn't show up. The transcript came a day later. We read it at Mom's table with the same deliberate pace we used on everything else. The undercover buyer asked about private deals. Spencer said he specialized in older owners who needed hand-holding. He said paperwork is flexible if you know the right people. He said we list at $470, take $420, and then he laughed. Tanya chimed in. Families get emotional. We get it done. Intent, James said simply. Plus pattern. Hall agreed. Monday, he drafted affidavits and walked them to a judge who had known him long enough to trust his commas. By Wednesday, a judge had signed search warrants for Spencer's office, Tanya's home office, and the document service that had pushed the POA into the recorder's portal. They executed them quiet. No TV cameras, boxes out the door, laptops bagged, a notary journal with gaps, an external drive labeled Buyer's Cash, a folder of POA templates with women's names on the top line and different fonts where signatures should have been, a sheet titled Talking Points with a Bullet. Downsize too much yard, will handle mail. When Hall told us he watched our faces like a doctor watches a patient hearing news, Mom didn't cry. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. What about Earl? She asked, and used my father's given name like she was reading it off a form. His participation is documented, Hall said. The forgery attempt came from Spencer's side. We'll look at conspiracy if the facts fit, but I don't arrest to make newspaper inches. I arrest when the file can stand on its own. James tapped his pen twice. Civilly, he said we can move on restitution and injunctive relief. Freeze what can be frozen. Stipulate what can be stipulated. Do it, Mom said. We filed a civil complaint that afternoon, conversion civil conspiracy, fraudulent conveyance attempt. We asked for injunctive relief and a temporary restraining order preventing any instrument touching the parcel without court approval. The judge signed the TRO by 4:15 p.m. and set a hearing for the next week. I served Dad by certified mail and email with the case number. The email bounced from his personal address. It didn't bounce from Tanya's. An hour later, Dad texted from a number I didn't recognize. We need to talk like adults. I stared at the words for a long minute. Then I typed back one word he taught me to use, and I'd learned to use differently. Understood. I didn't meet him in a park. I didn't meet him at a diner. I met him nowhere because this wasn't a conversation. It was a docket. The hearing took place in a courtroom that smelled faintly of old books and carpet cleaner. Mom sat beside me in a blouse I'd ironed. James spoke in a voice that never rose. Laid our papers in a line the judge could follow. Bank flags, recorder affidavit title, holds, assessor postcard Spencer email, POA attempt controlled meeting transcript AG case number. Spencer's attorney said words like miscommunication and overzealous paperwork. Tanya's counsel said entrepreneurial. Dad didn't appear. His counsel, a man with a pen, he clicked too much, argued domestic discord and equitable division, and flinched when the judge asked, "Where is your client today?" like he'd expected a different question. The judge read, "Judges who read are a gift." Temporary restraining order is granted and extended, he said. No conveyance, no encumbrance, no entry for marketing or staging. Absent Ms. Morgan's written consent and presence. Any violation will be sanctioned. He looked at Spencer's table. If there is another attempt to record a power of attorney that does not meet statutory requirements, I will refer it to the prosecutor myself. I didn't cheer. Mom didn't clap. We signed one paper, picked up our folder, and left, while the clerk stacked files for the next case. In the hallway, Angela from City Title texted, "Saw the order come through. We're pinned." Detective Hall texted, "Good. Keep preserving." Outside, the sky was the flat gray it gets in March before it decides if it will rain. We stood on the courthouse steps and looked at each other like people do when the noise lowers but hasn't gone quiet. "What now?" Mom asked. "Now we wait," I said, and we let them do their jobs. We didn't have to wait long. The next morning, Hall called with a clipped steadiness. "We're filing charges," he said. "Spencer for attempted theft by deception, forgery-related offenses, and conspiracy. We'll file aiding and abetting against Reed based on the communications in the controlled meeting. We're holding on Earl until we finish interviews and review the bank logs. Understood, I said. He hesitated. You should also know your banker friend Thompson sent the call recordings. Earl tried to coach a second voice on speaker. The voice never said her name. That helps us. Thank you, I said. By afternoon, 2 plain sedans were parked outside Spencer Realty. No lights, no show. Men in jackets walked in with a stack of papers and walked out with boxes. There were no neighbors on porches because offices don't have porches, but there were people in the burrito place across the street who watched quietly and chewed. Tanya was served at her condo. A process server posted a photo of the front door in our case file with a timestamp. Dad texted, "We can fix this," and then, "This is your fault," and then nothing for a day. That night, the house was very still. The cameras watched nothing. The fridge hummed. The yellow pad sat on the table with fewer blank pages than it had last week. I wrote 3 words and boxed them like the others. Paper. Worked. Publicly. Mom washed her coffee cup and set it upside down to dry. She stood at the sink for a moment and looked out at the yard where Dad said he'd plant tomatoes and never did. "Do you think he'll call?" she asked. "He already did," I said. Today, the world answered. She nodded, not happy, not sad. Just a woman who had been seen on paper and in person in the right order. The phone stayed quiet. The clock ticked. Somewhere a train went through the edge of town and blew its horn twice long, like it always does. We didn't chase Las Vegas. We didn't need to. 2 Mondays later, Detective Hall called while Mom was clipping coupons at the table that had become our command post. Updates, he said. Paper sounded like it was being turned on his end. Spencer's taking a deal. He'll plead to attempted theft by deception and forgery-related counts. Reed is cooperating, aiding, and abetting. We'll roll their statements into a larger file. Your case gave us dates, names, and a sequence. That matters. What about Earl? Mom asked. She didn't sigh when she said it. She just said the name like you mark a box. We're not charging him today, Hall said. His actions fit the civil side. Cleaner the bank logs help with knowledge, but the forgery attempt didn't originate from his device. If new facts come in, we'll look again. Understood, Mom said, and the word didn't wobble. I called James after I hung up. He already knew. He always does. Civil. First, he said. Then we see how far restitution runs. By Friday, we had a stipulated order in our inbox, Earl Morgan, to reimburse Mom for documented losses, relinquish any claim to the house, agree to no contact about the property, except through counsel, and not attempt any further transfer listing or encumbrance. Bank fraud operations attached a final ledger of the 2 wires. $18,000 had been clawed back. The first gone in cash. A third attempt had died on the vine in our kitchen at hour 6. The rest we would chase on paper. James slid the stipulation across the table. He signs this. He said tapping the line, or we set hearings, and he answers out loud. Most men with new shirts don't like speaking into microphones. Mom read every word, twice. She initialed each page with the same neat LM she'd used on permission slips and field trip rosters since 1998. When she got to the last page, she didn't pause. She signed and dated it, then set the pen down carefully between the salt and pepper. Where does he sign? She asked. On the copy, I just emailed his lawyer, James said. In black ink before noon tomorrow. He signed. We got the PDF at 11:36 a.m., a thin scrawl next to a printed name that had once meant father and now mostly meant liability. I printed it, 3 holes, top left corner, slid it into the binder behind the recorder instrument, and the title replies. Paper next to paper. Process seated with process. The TRO became a preliminary injunction without fuss. City title sent a short note. Internal alert remains. Angela stopped by after work with a container of enchiladas her sister made because people who work in offices also bring food, and food means you're not alone. She set the Pyrex on the counter like a medal that feeds you. On a Tuesday, Mr. Thompson called one last time. We're closing the case on our end, he said. Flags stay in place by your request. Account profile will require dual verification indefinitely, unless you change it. Leave it, I said. We like the word indefinitely when it keeps us safe. He cleared his throat. You did well, he said, which is as much praise as a bank gives. We didn't have a party. We did 3 things older people trust because they've seen the world bend and unbend. We made separate accounts for Mom's day-to-day and set bills to autopay. We went to the UPS store and got a small lockbox mailbox, so nothing important touched the curb. We met with a local attorney who writes wills and powers of attorney for farmers and church secretaries, and Mom signed a proper POA naming me for finances if she ever needed it, not because someone else was in a hurry. At the county, the clerk at the window knew our parcel by heart now. She smiled when we filed a homestead we should have filed years ago. "You're not the first," she said. "People forget paperwork until they need it." In the evenings, the house sounded like it had before dishwasher hum. The faucet's small stutter it shut off the clock's round insistence. Mom put the Idaho magnet back where it belonged and used it to hold Angela's card and a postcard from the assessor that said, "No change owner verified" in block letters. That one stayed up longer than it needed to. Neighbors did the things neighbors do when news travels without anyone saying it out loud. Marilyn dropped off rhubarb pie and didn't mention the day she sent the ring cam clip. A man from 3 doors down offered to look at the roof the way men do when they can see a shingle lifting from the sidewalk. The church lady who wrote, "So fun" on Dad's Vegas post left a lemon bunt and a folded note that said, "I didn't know." Mom put the bunt on a plate and the note in a drawer. Dad sent a text 2 weeks after the stipulation, "Family doesn't turn on family. We could have handled this privately." I stared at the blue bubble for a long time, then typed the one word he used to teach me on car rides when he wanted quiet, and I wanted answers. Understood. I didn't add anything. Some sentences do their own work. Detective Hall called one more time, months later, to say Spencer had been sentenced. Reed had taken probation and a fine, and there were other families, not our names, not our stories, who would get money back because our timeline had made sense to a judge. He thanked us for keeping receipts, which is how a man who sees too much says you did the right thing. We mailed the civil restitution checks to an account at a different bank that doesn't do neon debit cards. James closed the file with a letter the length of a bookmark. Case resolved. He didn't send a bill that day. He sent a picture of his dog in a cone because life is heavy enough without forgetting to laugh. Summer came. The tomatoes never got planted. We put basil in a pot and called it ambition. Mom learned how to scan to PDF with her phone without asking me to do it. I changed the furnace filter. Ordinary triumphs. One evening in July, we sat on the porch with iced tea that sweated cold rings onto the arms of the chairs. The neighbor kids rode bikes in a slow square. A train sounded somewhere to the south and blew its 2 long notes across the flat. Mom looked at the binder on the table between us, now fat enough to stop a door. "Do we keep it?" she asked. "We do," I said. "Paper keeps." She touched the cover with all 5 fingers, the way you touch a sleeping cat to let it know you're there. 6 hours, she said, like she was trying the words on again. "That's all we needed," I said. It had never been about the desert or the distance or writing a story where a daughter kicks in a door. It was the smaller, slower American story you file, you call you, wait, you ask to speak to someone with a badge when the polite version doesn't hold. You let the kitchen table be your desk. You put names on lines and you keep copies. You finish the fight you didn't start and you do it where other people can see. When my phone buzzed that night, it wasn't a bank or a detective. It was Angela sending a photo of a laminated card in a training binder at City Title Owner Affidavit Flags Best Practices. Under it, in small type, Morgan V. Spencer, C-case file. She'd covered our last name with a post-it in the picture she sent. It was a kindness. I turned the screen so Mom could see. She smiled small and complete and went back to watching the street where nothing urgent was happening. I never chased him to Las Vegas. I didn't need to. I just made sure Las Vegas had nothing to give him. My name is Sarah Hale, and the last thing I ever expected was to hear my own father sneer across a crowded room, my daughter in the 82nd Airborne. "She's probably just a janitor there." The words cut like a bayonet, sharper than any jump from 1,200 feet. Silverware clinked against plates, laughter rolled across the church hall, and I sat frozen, staring at the man who raised me. Everyone laughed except for the groom. His eyes didn't hold mockery, they held something else. respect, recognition, maybe even outrage. That moment would change everything. But before I tell you what he did, let me take you back to how it all began. I grew up in Hendersonville, North Carolina, a small town where Friday nights meant high school football and Sunday mornings meant church. My father, Carl Hale, was the kind of man who wore his pride like a suit and tie. He had no shortage of words for my older sister, Rebecca, brightest in her class, so graceful, the pride of the family. For me, it was always different. I was the rough one, the stubborn one, the one he thought would never amount to much. I remember being 12 years old, standing in our kitchen after a softball game, sweaty and grinning because I'd hit the winning run. He barely looked up from his paper. "That's nice, Sarah. Don't get cocky," he muttered, then asked Rebecca how her choir practice went. Mom tried in her own quiet way to make up for it. She'd put an extra cookie in my lunch bag, or whisper, "I'm proud of you," before I left for school. But Dad's voice always carried further. It wasn't yelling, it wasn't angry, it was worse. It was dismissive, like I was never worth the space I took up. When high school ended, Rebecca had a full ride to Chapel Hill, and Dad beamed when he dropped her off, the kind of smile that cracked across his whole face. For me, I enlisted. I didn't have the grades or the money for college, and more than that, I wanted something Dad said I could never have: respect. I walked into the Army recruiter's office on Main Street, palms sweaty, and told him I wanted airborne. The recruiter, Sergeant Miller, raised an eyebrow. "You sure it's not easy?" My answer came quicker than I thought. "I don't care. I need to prove something." He studied me a moment, then nodded. "Well, the 82nd doesn't take janitors. They take warriors. You ready to jump?" The first time I told my family, it was at Sunday dinner. Mom gasped, her fork clattering against her plate. Rebecca smiled politely, then changed the subject to her sorority plans. "And Dad?" He just chuckled. "Airborne, Sarah. You won't last a week. You'll come crawling home crying for college money." I clenched my fists under the table, said nothing, but in my chest burned a vow I'd prove him wrong. Training was brutal. Fort Benning heat clung to your skin like glue. I remember the endless push-ups in red Georgia dirt, the sting of sweat in my eyes as drill sergeants shouted until my ears rang. The jump tower, the harness biting into my shoulders, the way my stomach dropped out when I looked down from 250 feet. Every night, I lay on a bunk that smelled of iron and dust, staring at the ceiling fan, whispering to myself, "Don't quit. Don't give him the satisfaction." When I finally earned those silver jump wings, I held them in my hand until the metal warmed against my skin, a silent trophy Dad would never acknowledge. Deployment came quick. Iraq, then Afghanistan. I saw deserts that stretched forever, sunsets the color of blood oranges, and nights so dark the stars felt close enough to touch. I jumped with brothers and sisters who trusted me with their lives. We shared rations, cigarettes, and fear. We mourned when someone didn't make it back. I wrote home telling Dad about my squad, about the work we did. His replies when they came were short, mostly about Rebecca's promotions, her engagement, her new house. My stories, my medals, my sacrifices, they barely registered. By the time I rotated home, I carried more than a rucksack. I carried years of silence, years of being invisible to the man whose approval I still deep down craved. And then came Rebecca's wedding. The rehearsal dinner was in the church basement, folding tables lined with white paper cloths, paper plates piled high with fried chicken, green beans, and mashed potatoes. The scent of sweet tea mixed with perfume and cologne. Everyone from town seemed to be there, neighbors, cousins, Dad's old friends from the factory. I sat near the end of the table, my uniform jacket pressed and medals gleaming. For once, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd say something kind. Dad stood for a toast. His voice carried strong and proud. To Rebecca, the brightest star in our family, and to her groom, a fine young man. Everyone clapped. Then his eyes slid to me, and the corner of his mouth curled. "And Sarah." "Well?" "She says she's in the 82nd Airborne, but folks don't let her fool you. She's probably just a janitor there." The words slapped harder than any drill sergeant ever had. Laughter erupted, some uneasy, some cruel. My throat burned. My hands shook under the table. I wanted to vanish, to melt into the linoleum floor. Across the room, though, I caught the groom's gaze. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smiling. He looked at me with something else, something that made my heart pound. And in that instant, I realized my story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The rehearsal dinner broke apart slowly, like a storm leaving puddles after the rain. Folks milled around carrying paper plates to the trash, balancing styrofoam cups of sweet tea. The laughter that had stung me moments earlier still echoed in my ears. My father slapped backs, shook hands, and acted as if nothing had happened, as if reducing me to janitor in front of half the town was harmless fun. I stayed in my chair, back stiff eyes, focused on the floor tiles patterned in faded green and white squares. Mom hovered near me, her face pinched with apology, but she didn't say anything. She never did when Dad's words cut sharp. Maybe she thought silence was safer. Maybe she thought I was strong enough to handle it. Rebecca floated by in her white rehearsal dress, radiant and flushed her friends, trailing like ribbons. She didn't look at me either. Why would she? Tomorrow was her big day, and I was just the sister who never fit the picture. As I sat there, the sound of folding chairs scraping against the linoleum reminded me of another time, another humiliation. Hendersonville Middle School 8th grade awards night. Rebecca won for academics, choir, and leadership. I got one certificate, most improved in math. I walked across the stage, clutching that piece of paper, and glanced into the crowd. Dad leaned back, arms crossed, his face blank. Later in the car, he said, "Well, at least you tried." That memory still sits heavy. And it wasn't the only one. High school graduation, I wore my maroon cap and gown, heart swelling with pride, just to have made it through. Rebecca's name was called, and Dad stood clapping so hard people turned to look. When mine was called, he gave a polite golf clap, then checked his watch. It was always like that, Rebecca the golden one. Me, the afterthought. After graduation, I worked double shifts at the diner off Highway 64, pouring coffee for truckers and retirees, tucking crumpled dollar bills into a jar labeled Army. I decided long before that I wasn't going to spend my life waiting for Dad's approval. If he wouldn't give me pride, I'd earn it myself. The recruiter's office was small, tucked between a barber shop and a pawn store. Posters of soldiers in uniform lined the walls, slogans in bold letters, "Be all you can be." I remember Sergeant Miller looking me over with those skeptical eyes. "You sure you want airborne?" he asked. "It's not just jumping out of planes. It's grueling. It's fear every single time." I clenched my fists and nodded. "I'm sure." He leaned back, crossed his arms. "Most folks who come in here talk big, but they quit after the first tower. The 82nd doesn't take janitors. They take fighters. You ready to prove you belong?" Something in me lit up. "Yes, sir." Those weeks at Fort Benning nearly broke me. The Georgia sun pressed down until my skin blistered. The red dirt clung to sweat like a second skin. We ran miles with rucksacks that felt like bricks' legs, burning lungs on fire. The towers loomed above us, metal skeletons against the sky. My hands trembled the first time I climbed the ground, dizzying below. But when the harness snapped tight and the sergeant barked, "Jump," I did. That first fall stole the breath from my chest. The chute snapped open, the world spread wide, and I realized I was flying. I hit the ground hard-rolled like they taught us and came up grinning. Pain radiated through my shoulder, but pride burned hotter. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself. When we finally earned our jump wings, Sergeant Miller pinned mine on, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "You earned this. Don't ever let anyone take it away from you." I carried those words home, tucked them deeper than any insult Dad could throw. Deployment was another test. Iraq first sandstorms that stripped the skin-raw nights filled with distant gunfire. Then Afghanistan mountains that swallowed you whole, silence broken by radios crackling at dawn. I wasn't a janitor. I was a paratrooper, trusted with lives. We lost good people too many. At night, we whispered names into the dark, promising never to forget. I wrote home when I could. Short letters, neat handwriting. I told Mom about the sunsets, about the kids who waved when our convoys passed. I told Dad about the commendation I'd received, the respect my squad showed me. His replies came weeks later, 1 or 2 lines. Rebecca got promoted again. The roof needs fixing. Never a word about pride. Still, I pressed on. Because respect wasn't something he could grant or deny, it was something I carried in my own chest-proof with every jump, every mission, every brother and sister in arms who had my back. So when I sat in that church basement at the rehearsal dinner, listening to Dad reduce it all to janitor, I clenched my jaw and kept silent. I wanted to lash out, to stand and shout what I'd done, who I'd become. But I didn't. Not yet. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it waits patient for the right moment to land. And as I lifted my eyes from the floor and saw the groom watching me, serious, unwavering, I had the strangest feeling. That moment was coming sooner than I thought. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke before the sun and laced up my running shoes like muscle memory. When the world is loud and ugly, I go back to the few places inside myself that are quiet and steady. Cadence breath, the rhythm of boots on pavement. Hendersonville's streets were still porch lights glowing a paper boy, flinging the day's news into damp grass. I ran past the diner where I used to pour coffee, past the school where I learned to keep my chin level, past the church whose basement still held the echo of my father's laugh. With each mile, I let the sting of last night burn off like fog. By the time the sky softened from gray to pink, I knew where I needed to start this part of the story. Not in that basement, but years earlier, with a door, a wind, and a voice that sounded like God, and a thunderstorm had a child. Stand in the door. The jump master's command rattled in my bones the first time I shuffled forward, hooking my static line, rotating hips to face the wind. We'd rehearsed the sequence so many times our bodies could have done it in sleep. Hands on reserve elbows and eyes forward. The aircraft roared, hot jet fuel stinging the back of my throat. The red light glowed above the open tail like a warning. I could feel the guy behind me breathing, could feel the fear chewing my insides like a dog with a shoe, until training gave it offense. Green light. And then we moved. Not one by one, like in a movie, but in a flow tap, go, 82 heartbeats braided into one long line spilling into the sky. When it was my turn, the jump master slapped my shoulder, and the world became wind and white noise and the fierce grip of gravity. For one bare second, I was nowhere and nothing. A bead of water flicked off a fingertip. Then the T-11 snapped open above me, the harness caught, and the violence turned into a calm, so wide it made my throat ache. The drop zone spread out like a quilt, fields, dirt roads, tiny ant-sized trucks. My mind went quiet. I checked canopy, slipped left to avoid another chute set up for landing. PLF, I reminded myself. Feet, calf, thigh, hip, shoulder. The ground rushed up and did what ground does. I hit, rolled, and lay there on my back, staring into a hot, blue sky, laughing. I'd jumped. Back in the assembly area, sweat pouring down every back, we coiled lines and flake chutes and told our little lies about how easy it all was. That night in the barracks, Specialist Kim and I split an MRE and argued over who got the jalapeno cheese. Kim was from Ohio, the kind of quiet that hides an iron will. "You breathing yet?" she asked, peeling open a cracker pack. "Yeah," I said, "since the canopy opened." She smirked. That's when everybody breathes. We all had a way of keeping each other honest. Sergeant Torres did it with gallows humor and a stare that could cut steel. Corporal Denham did it with stories about his kids and how his oldest wanted to be an astronaut. I did it by waking up before first light, running a little farther than I wanted to. We broke blisters and learned the weird intimacy of JMPI inspection, strangers checking every strap and metal bit because your life belonged to their eyes. We learned that fear never leaves, it just gets domesticated. It becomes the house dog that growls at the door so you don't have to. When our wings were pinned on the battalion, Commander shook our hands and I felt something like a page turning. I mailed a photo to Mom with a note, "Made it." I didn't send one to Dad. I told myself that was strength, but truth be told, it was a kind of pleading. If he asked to see it, maybe I'd finally matter. He didn't ask. Then came deployment. I won't dress it up. War is hours of boredom, braided with minutes of terror, and a river of small necessary things running through the middle, checking radio batteries, cleaning weapons until your knuckles crack, memorizing the faces of the people you might have to carry. In Iraq, the wind tasted like dust and old copper. We watched the horizon for things that didn't fit. At dusk, we swapped jokes terrible enough to make a chaplain blush. Kim kept a notebook where she wrote one good thing a day, even if it was found a clean sock. I started doing it too. Some days, my good thing was a mango half a world from any tree. Some days, it was a letter from a kid in a church back home, with crayon stars marching across the bottom. Afghanistan was mountains and silence and radios that crackled right when you needed them to be clear. On patrol, the world narrowed to footfalls and breath, to the weight of your ruck and the thought of water. We learned the particular piece of a meal split 5 ways, because that was what you had, and you wanted everyone to have some. We learned the names of the people who'd fed us in the village, the dog that liked denim better than anyone else, the way the sky went indigo just before full dark. And yes, we learned loss. We put a patch of our hearts under a stone more than once and walked away straighter so those names would travel with us. I earned a couple of ribbons I didn't think about much. In a ceremony, stateside, between rotations, a colonel I barely knew shook my hand and said, "Hail, you make the division proud." I sent the program home. Mom called and cried a little. Dad texted 2 words, "Busy." Congrats. I stared at that period like it was a door closing. And then the orders shifted like they always do, and somehow I got a 2-week window that lined up with Rebecca's wedding. An invitation came tucked in with bills at my mom's house, calligraphy lace, the kind of cardstock that tries to smell like roses. I ran a thumb over the gold letters, Rebecca and Nathaniel, my sister, and the man whose eyes in the church basement had not laughed. I showed up early, because soldiers do. Offered to set up chairs, carry coolers, run errands. Dad told me to relax, said the boys had it. By boys, he meant his friends' retired factory foremen with soft bellies. Good men who didn't know what to say to me beyond "thank you for your service" and "how's the food over there?" I smiled and told them the truth. The peaches in Georgia are better than any dessert in a DFAC. That night, after he called me a janitor and the laughter rolled after the room broke apart and people pretended not to look at me, I went home to Mom's and laid my uniform across the back of a chair. The jacket was dark blue, the brass polished the edges sharp. I lined my ribbons like a small private prayer, neat and square, the way we're taught. There's a tenderness to caring for your own uniform nobody tells you about. It's like washing a body after a long day, reminding the cloth and the skin it covers that both still belong to you. Mom knocked and came in with a plate of pound cake. She sat on the edge of the bed and rested her hand on my sleeve, careful not to smudge the shine. "I'm sorry," she said, voice small. He thinks he's being funny. He thinks a lot of things I said softer than I felt. She looked at the ribbons, the way mothers do, trying to read a language they never learned, hearing meanings anyway. "You've built a life," she whispered, "even if he doesn't see it." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. In the morning, I'd button that jacket, lift my chin, and walk into that church like the soldier I was. I didn't know what the groom would do, only that his eyes had been a kind of promise. Not to save me, no. We don't need saving. To see me. To make the room see me too. People think revenge is fire and spectacle. But at its best, it's a mirror turned to the light. All I wanted was for the room to see the reflection I carried every day. The one God and jump masters and hard miles had hammered into shape. The one my father refused to recognize. It turns out someone else did. I came home 2 days before the rehearsal, the kind of Carolina summer day that wraps itself around you like a damp towel. Mom met me on the porch with a hug that smelled like Tide and lilacs. The screen door squeaked the way it always had. Inside the house felt smaller, like the walls had moved a half step closer since I left. The old cuckoo clock my grandfather brought back from Germany still ticked, running a minute slow. On the kitchen table sat a stack of mason jars tied with raffia and a handwritten list in Rebecca's blocky print centerpieces: peonies, baby's breath twine. Nathan to pick up candles. Mom poured sweet tea and asked the questions. Mothers ask, "Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Do you have what you need? And I gave the answers. Daughters, give. Yes, ma'am. Most days. I'm fine. She touched the edge of my sleeve the way she always does, as if my uniform is a living thing that might bite if startled. I'm glad you're here, she said. Even just for a little. Dad got home from the hardware store around 5. He still had the same sawdust halo on his boots, the same gruff hey there, as he set his keys in the bowl by the door. He kissed Mom's cheek, rifled the mail, and flicked the circulars into the trash. When he finally looked at me, his eyes did that quick up and down like a foreman assessing a new hire. So he said, "You made it." I did, I answered. Good, he said. And then, as if on cue, you know, Rebecca found a bargain on those candles. Girl can sniff out a deal. She always could, I said, because the truth costs nothing. Dinner was spaghetti salad from Mom's garden garlic bread from a foil bag. Dad talked about the cost of lumber and the new lanes they were adding to the interstate. Mom asked me to pass the Parmesan like I'd been sitting there every night of my life. We were 3 people in a familiar play reciting lines we'd memorized years ago. When I mentioned that my leave would end before the 4th, Dad nodded and said, "Well, somebody's got to work," and then asked if the Braves were winning this year. I twirled pasta on my fork and reminded myself that not every silence needs filling. The next morning, I ran errands with Mom, the kind that make a wedding happen. Picking up dry cleaning, convincing the bakery to add 6 more rolls, grabbing more folding chairs from the church basement. Hendersonville was as it always is. Geraniums in window boxes. A retired couple arguing amiably over tomatoes at the farmer's market. Teenagers in Sonic shirts on break in the shade. At the post office, Mrs. Talbot from Sunday school squeezed my hand and said, "We're proud of you, honey," in a voice that made me want to sit down on the tile and cry. People like her had kept me tethered when I felt unmoored. Folks who didn't know what to say but said it anyway, because love is awkward and shows up in small, sturdy ways. Nathaniel Nate to everyone. But the calligraphy met us at the church that afternoon to help set up tables. He was taller than I remembered, with the kind of easy smile that puts nervous people at ease. He wore a gray t-shirt darkening with sweat and a ball cap with a faded fly fishing logo. "You must be Sarah," he said, sticking out a hand. His grip was warm, firm. "I'm Nate. I've heard a lot about you." "Only the good parts, I hope," I said. "The best parts," he answered, and his eyes said he meant it. We unfolded tables while the sanctuary cooled from the day's heat. He asked about Fort Liberty, he still called it Fort Bragg, and whether the drop zones looked different in summer. "They look like somebody forgot to mow their front yard," I said, and he laughed. At some point, he nodded toward the ribbons pinned neat on my jacket hanging over a chair. "Mind if I ask how many jumps?" The question was simple, but it landed with a weight I recognized. People ask curious questions. Soldiers ask the ones that matter. 27, I said. 28. If you count the one where I landed in a ditch and mud tried to eat me. He grinned. "I think the ditch counts." I didn't ask him about service because you learn not to assume. But when he bent to lift a box, his shirt rode up, and I saw the edge of a scar at his side, the kind you get from either bad luck or a life that's been lived hard. He saw me see it and didn't flinch. "Car accident," he said. "College. Dumb and invincible. Woke up different." He straightened and added quieter. "Makes me respect deliberate decisions. Like enlisting. There are moments when people show you their insides on purpose." I tucked his words away like a note in a breast pocket. Rebecca floated in and out that day, trailed by bridesmaids smelling like hairspray and excitement. She looked beautiful, of course she did, every movement a practiced grace. When she hugged me, it was quick, a little awkward around the shoulders, like we were still figuring out how to be on the same team. "Don't forget fittings at 2, she said. "And maybe wear something light. It's going to be hot." In the quiet minutes, Mom and I tied twine around jars and tried not to talk about Dad, but he filled spaces the way certain men do. His opinions arrive and sit down even when he's not in the room. When he did show up to check the fellowship hall, he walked the aisle like a foreman on inspection, tapping a chair. Here, straightening a hymn book there. "Looks good," he said, and then to Nate, "You ready to take on our girl?" The way he said "our" could have meant family, could have meant possession. Depends on the day. Nate handled him the way fishermen handle a hooked bass, steady even pressure, no sudden moves. "Yes, sir," he said easily. "I figure marriage is a team sport. I'm grateful for the team." Dad snorted as if gratitude were a foreign language and then wandered off to tell someone the story about how he once fixed a leak at the church with duct tape and a prayer. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I sat on the back steps with a glass of water, sweating rings onto the wood, and listened to katydids talk to each other in the trees. Mom joined me, tucking her legs under her like the girl she'd been before the life she built. "You nervous?" she asked. "About what?" She tilted her head. "You know what?" I sighed. "I can take a joke, Mom. I've taken worse. I didn't say from whom." She watched the dark for a while, then said, "When your dad feels small, he makes other people smaller. It's a habit he learned a long time ago." She touched my hand. "It doesn't have to be yours?" We let the night breathe around us. A train rolled somewhere far off the whistle, stretching across town like a ribbon. I thought about the things I'd learned to carry and the things I'd learned to set down. I thought about Kim in Ohio, writing found a clean sock in her notebook about Denham's dog that favored him in a country that favored no one. I thought about how many times I'd stood in a door with nothing between me and sky and moved anyway. The rehearsal day itself ran on coffee and lists. My hair frizzed in the humidity and my shoes squeaked on the church linoleum. I wore my uniform because Rebecca asked me to. It'll look nice in pictures, and because some part of me still hoped my father might see me. Not the outline he'd made of me, but me. People arrived carrying their own small storms of worry and joy. The pastor rehearsed the vows in a patient baritone. A flower girl dropped every petal at once and then cried. Someone's phone buzzed with a tornado watch nobody believed. And then we ate. Paper plates, green beans, mac and cheese, a ham. Someone's aunt said had been smoked since Easter. I sat close to the end of a table so I could escape if I needed to. Dad raised his plastic cup and started his speech, a hum of praise for Rebecca, a rib at Nate about learning to like her meatloaf, a story from when she was 10 and won her first ribbon. People laughed in the right places. He could do this part in his sleep charm. The room run his finger along the edge of respect like it belonged to him. And then, like always, he looked at me as if remembering I existed. "You all know my other daughter," he said. "She's in the... what is it? The 82nd Airborne." He smiled the way men smile when they plan to say something they think will kill. "But don't let her fool you. They've got to have somebody sweep up, right?" The room broke into laughter, some polite, some loud, some surprised and relieved that he'd given them permission. I felt the old heat rise up the back of my neck. I kept my hands flat on the table so I wouldn't ball them into fists. I tasted metal and memory on my tongue. Across the hall, Nate's smile fell away like a mask someone had set down. He stood without scraping his chair, walked to the mic with a quiet that made people look up. He glanced at me, one steady glance, and in it, I saw a door I'd stood in before wind pressed against my chest, waiting on a green light. Nate tapped the mic once, just enough to hush the side conversations, and said, "May I?" The pastor nodded, uncertain. Dad leaned back in his chair, lips already curling like he'd been handed a second course. The laughter quieted into that rustling sound a room makes when it's deciding whether to be kind. "I'm Nathaniel Carter," Nate said, "and tomorrow I get to marry Rebecca. Tonight I want to say a word about family." He paused. Let the word sit there. "And about Sarah." A few heads tilted. Paper plates paused midair. Dad's eyebrows went up. "Well now," he murmured to his buddies, "this ought to be good." I felt heat start under my collar, the kind that can be either shame or anger, and doesn't decide until you make it. I wasn't sure which one lived in my spine at that moment. I kept my eyes on Nate because his belonged to a man who had already chosen. He smiled, not the easy grin he wore when he moved chairs, but something steadier. "I haven't known Sarah long," he said, "but I know this. I've met a person who has done hard things on purpose for people she loves and for people she'll never meet." A cough somewhere. Someone's plastic fork snapped. My father folded his arms, chin lifting. "It's a rehearsal, son, not a recruitment," he called, half joking, half warning. Nate didn't look at him. "Sir?" He said evenly, "I'm not recruiting. I'm recognizing." That word recognizing landed like a coin in a church plate. I saw Mom blink fast. The pastor shifted on his feet. Rebecca stood behind the cake table, one hand on a basket of rolls, her eyes flicking between the men like a metronome. Her maid of honor touched her elbow. Rebecca didn't move. Nate went on. Some jobs are quiet until they aren't. Some lives are invisible until somebody decides to see. He glanced at me, then fast, and sure. "Sarah, can I ask a question?" My throat felt thick. I managed." "How many jumps?" he asked. A few people blinked at the word jumps, like it was a riddle. Dad smirked, already winding up. "Oh, come on," he said. "Next you'll ask how many mops." I could have stayed silent. Years of practice had made silence into armor. But a paratrooper answers. When called. 27, I said, voice steady. 28 if you count the ditch. "The ditch counts," Nate said. And if he smiled, it was with his eyes only. He turned back to the room. 28 times Sarah walked to a door with the world howling outside it and stepped into sky. Not for a dare, not for a thrill, for duty. A murmur rolled the length of the hall and back. Mrs. Talbot from Sunday school put a hand to her chest with a soft, "Oh." One of Dad's buddies, Tom Reed, who used to coach Little League, cleared his throat and stared hard at his plate. On the far side, an old man who'd worn a VFW cap since before I learned long division lifted it a fraction, as if some muscle remembered. Dad let out a laugh that didn't have humor in it. "Duty," he said. "Listen to this boy talk. Son, it's a wedding. We're supposed to toast the couple, not tell war stories." Nate's voice stayed mild. "Yes, sir. I'm toasting the couple. I'm toasting the family I'm joining. And I'm saying," he leaned a forearm on the lectern, "there's more than one kind of star at this table." It wasn't a punch. It was a hand setting something down exactly where it belonged. The air changed. You can feel it when a crowd recalibrates, when laughter drains off and something else fills the space. Curiosity, maybe. Decency, even. The flower girl, who had been stuck to her mother's leg, let go and marched up to the corner of the stage to stare at me like a scientist discovering a new beetle. "Did you jump out of a real airplane?" she asked, loud enough to carry. "I did," I said. "Were you scared?" "Every time." "Did you cry?" "Only once," I said, when the peanut butter in my ration wouldn't open. She giggled. People smiled despite themselves. Mom exhaled a laugh she'd been holding since June. Dad slapped the table, like he'd decided the game needed changing. All right, he said. "She's real brave." "Okay, can we eat cake now? I got a big day tomorrow." Nate let the silence answer him. Then he said, "Sarah, what's the first thing they teach you at the door?" I knew what he was asking, and I knew who he was really asking it for. I sat up, let my shoulders find the square they know. "Stand in the door," I said. "Hook up. Check static line. Eyes forward." "And what comes next?" "You wait on the light," I said. "Red to green." Nate nodded. "You wait on the light," he repeated softly. "You don't push ahead of it. You don't lag behind. You trust the process, and you move when it says move." That was not for me alone. That was for a room that had laughed on cue and was now wondering whether the cue had been wrong. The VFW cap tipped farther back. "What unit?" the old man asked, voice rough with gravel and memory. "It's 2nd Airborne," I said. He nodded, once a decision. "All American," he said to the nearest person as if translating. Dad blew air through his nose. "Bill, don't start," he said without looking. "Next thing, we'll have taps and a color guard." Bill's eyes slid to him, unamused. "Carl," he said, "there's a time to joke and a time to hush." You could have heard a hymn drop. Rebecca moved, then set down the basket of rolls and came to stand near Nate. Her voice was careful. "Nate, is this? Are we?" Her eyes flitted to me. She looked like a woman halfway across a creek who isn't sure if the next rock is steady. Nate didn't make her stand there alone. "Becca," he said gently, "I want to start our marriage by doing one thing right, in a room full of people we love." He looked at me again, and whatever he found there seemed to settle his shoulders. He took off his cap, set it on the lectern, and straightened. Dad shook his head, speaking to the air. You folk get carried away with all this hero talk. Sarah's got everybody spun up with stories and jump counts. He chuckled, the sound wrong in the new quiet. I changed the brake pads on her car in the rain once. You don't hear anybody pinning medals on me. I didn't answer him because he wasn't talking to me. He was building a wall he could hide behind. I'd spent a lifetime mistaking those walls for mountains. Nate stepped back from the mic and looked toward the pastor. Reverend, he asked softly. The pastor, a tall man with hands built to lift casseroles and caskets, came forward like he was entering a porch swing argument between neighbors. He took in the room, the faces tipped forward, the way even the air seemed to hold its breath. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Friends, he said, were rehearsing love. That means practicing recognition. He turned slightly, not enough to stage it, just enough to make space. Nate walked down, off the low step. He didn't move quickly. He moved like a man who knows a red light from a green one. For the first time all evening, my father looked uncertain. It flashed across his face and was gone, a bird in and out of a bush. He sat up straighter. What exactly are we doing here? He demanded. Nate stopped in front of me. He didn't reach out like a rescuer. He didn't loom like a judge. He looked me in the eyes, and there was that steady thing again, the thing I once felt under a silk canopy with 1,000 feet of air. Below me, the thing that says, move when the light changes. Sarah, he said, voice low, but carrying, would you stand up? There are moments a life funnels toward, and when you reach them, you recognize the shape, even if you didn't know its name. My knees unlocked. I stood. The scrape of my chair legs sounded louder than it had any right to. The flower girl grinned at me like we shared a secret. Nate took a breath, squared himself, and lifted his hand. Nate's hand rose, fingers flat to his brow. It wasn't a soldier's crisp salute. It was a civilian's careful imitation, the kind of gesture you make when you're trying hard to show the right shape of respect. He held it a heartbeat, then let it fall, and turned to the mic. The room tilted toward him, sound thinning the way sound does at the lip of a waterfall. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice steady before we cut cake, I'd like to recognize someone who has carried more than her share. Plastic forks stilled. The pastor took a small step back, giving the moment room. Mom's hands clasped on the table, knuckles pale. I felt my pulse in my throat, a soft drum. Somewhere near the kitchen, an ice machine coughed, and then quieted, like it too was waiting to hear. Nate faced the room. You've heard jokes about mops, he said calmly. You've heard the word janitor. I like janitors. They keep places livable and safe. But that's not Sarah's job. He glanced at me, not asking permission, offering partnership. Sarah is a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. 28 jumps. And that means while the rest of us were sleeping under roofs, she was stepping out of a perfectly good airplane into black air because her country asked her to. A few heads tipped like people were seeing me from a new angle, and the light was different there. Bill in the VFW cap set both palms on the table and pushed up to stand. His mouth tightened with the effort. He kept standing anyway. Dad crossed his arms, aiming his voice toward his friends. Well, if this isn't something he said, trying for a mused landing somewhere south of it. Next, he'll pin on medals. Nate didn't answer him. He lifted the mic off its stand, carried it down the step, and stopped 2 feet from me. I could see the tiny fray on the sleeve of his t-shirt, the sheen of sweat along his hairline. He swallowed. Sarah, he said, you don't need me to speak for you. I just want to do one true thing with the time that's mine. He turned, and in a voice that reached the corners without shouting, he said, Paratrooper hail, all American front and center. The words didn't crack like thunder. They landed like something finding its home. I felt my shoulders answer before my mind did. Years of drills rose up quiet and sure. I took a breath, stepped out from my chair, and moved. The crowd parted the way a congregation does when it decides to be kind. Slowly at first, then all at once, as if some shared instinct remembered the choreography. Front and center in a fellowship hall isn't a formation. It's a patch of scuffed linoleum near a flag that's been in more parades than any of us. I stood there because he'd called me there, not to plead a case but to be seen. My heels squared, chin level, palms easy at my sides. Nate faced me. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't bow like a courtier. He lifted his right hand again and gave the salute a second time, shorter, cleaner, as if practice could fit into 1 minute and matter. When he dropped it, he said not into the mic this time, but into the space between us. "Thank you for your service." Then he turned so the room could hear and added, "And shame on me if I ever laugh when courage is nearby." It wasn't rehearsed, but it sounded like a vow. Bill came around his table, the brim of his cap shadowing his eyes. He planted himself beside me like an old tree staking out weather. His hand rose in a salute that had been taught by men with crew cuts and cigarettes, and it held an exactness the years hadn't taken. "All American," he said just loud enough. Something shifted a hinge I couldn't name. Tom Reed stood his little league coach's belly, brushing the table's edge, and snapped his hand to his brow. Behind him, Mrs. Talbot pressed her palm over her heart, then seemed to think better of it, and lifted into an imperfect salute, tears making bright roads down her cheeks. 3 teenagers in Sonic shirts here to help clean up looked at each other, and then stood too, hands awkward faces, serious. The room lifted to its feet in ragged waves, not everyone, not all at once, but enough to change the air. A hum rose that wasn't laughter. It was the sound of people choosing to measure a life by effort instead of myth. Dad stayed seated. He stared at me like I'd broken some private rule. If looks could sand wood, the table under his hands would have been smooth as a pew. "What is this?" he demanded, the old certainty cracking at the edges. He swung his gaze to Mom. "Helen?" Mom didn't answer. Her face, soft, stubborn, held. She stood too, slower than the other's hands settling at her sides as if she'd set down something heavy at last. Rebecca was the last familiar thing that moved. She came around the cake table, set the knife down as if acknowledging it was the wrong tool for the moment, and joined us in the open space between me and Nate. Her eyes shone the way eyes do when they're refracting too many new angles at once. "I didn't know," she said, and the sentence wasn't an apology or an excuse. It was a beginning. Dad gave a scoff that didn't have a place to land. "She's milking it," he said to no one in particular. "You all are being ridiculous." Bill turned his head just enough to look at him. "Carl," he said, weary, without being cruel, "you had your turn at the mic." I didn't expect the small mercy of laughter that followed gentle, grateful nothing like the earlier kind. It washed the edges off the room. The flower girl, solemn as a judge, marched over and lifted her hand alongside mine, her tiny elbow sticking straight out. "I salute too," she announced. "Because brave." "Because brave," I echoed, and my voice broke, and then mended in the same breath. Nate held the mic at his side now, forgotten. He spoke like a man talking around a campfire. "Sarah told me once the first lesson is to stand in the door and wait on the light." He looked at me. "I think this was green, don't you?" I nodded. "Green," I said, and smiled for the first time all night in a way that reached my eyes. He lifted the mic one last time. "Friends," he said before we sliced the world's prettiest ham, "would you join me in doing what's right and simple?" He paused. "Thank her." There's a sound a room makes when words turn into action, when hands come together, not politely, but in recognition. It filled that basement, rose up to the ceiling, tiles rattled the fluorescent tubes a little. It wasn't applause for a legend. It was for a person with a name and a job and a spine. I let it pour through me and past me like water through a sluice, carrying silt and leaving gold. Dad's chair scraped. For a second I thought he'd stand. Instead, he reached for a cup, knocked it over, and stared at the ellipse of sweet tea, spreading like a map of a country he didn't know how to live in. He tried on a smile. It didn't fit. The room had moved and left him where he was. The pastor stepped forward with the ease of someone used to noticing when a moment has touched ground. "Let us pray," he said, not piously, just practically, like grace and gravity belonged to the same list. Heads dipped. Not every head, but most. He thanked God for safe returns and hard work and the stubborn mercy of families learning late. He asked for gentleness where none had grown yet. When he said amen, the word felt earned. Nate turned to me again, and this time, he didn't salute. He offered his hand. I took it, heat and callous pulse, and promised the ordinary materials of human bridges. He leaned in, voice low. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me borrow the right words." "You got them right," I said. "And if you didn't, Bill would have told you." Bill grunted, which was his version of laughter. Somebody started passing plates. Someone else cut the ham. The flower girl insisted I take the first slice of cake because soldiers go first. I told her we usually eat last. She considered that, then handed me a fork anyway. Dad watched small behind his own certainty. For once, I didn't go looking for his eyes. The room was full of eyes that could see. The moment didn't make me taller. It didn't make the past lighter. It did something simpler, and for me, holier. It set the scales on the table where everyone could watch them balance. Not against my father, against the lie he'd spent years polishing until it shone enough to throw blinding light. The lie dimmed in that room. Truth took its seat. And because I am my mother's daughter and a soldier, both I exhaled, lifted my chin, and let the aftertaste be gratitude rather than triumph. Later, when the hall was almost empty and the ice machine had found its cough again, Bill tipped his cap. "You did good, paratrooper," he said. I stood where I was told, I answered. He smiled. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing." After the crowd thinned and the church ladies boxed leftovers with the efficiency of a FEMA team, I helped Mom stack chairs the way we'd done after potlucks my whole childhood, 2 at a time, legs nested like faithful old friends. The hall smelled like coffee and Smithfield ham and the faint, clean bite of pine sol. Laughter still clung to the corners, but it was a kinder kind than before. Outside dusk had turned the parking lot into a mirror. Streetlights pooled on asphalt like little suns. I found a quiet spot by the soda machine and leaned against the cool, humming metal. My hands had stopped shaking. They were steady the way they get after the chute opens and the line twists out. That's the feeling I kept turning over in my mind, a body remembering how to be carried by something bigger than its hurt. Mom came first. She didn't say hello, just slipped in beside me, shoulder to shoulder, the way women who share a kitchen move around each other without thinking. "You all right?" she asked. "I am." I said and meant it. "You?" She laughed once, soft and wet. "I am now." We didn't fill the silence. We let it do its slow work. Rebecca joined us still in her rehearsal dress, a smear of icing on her knuckle. She looked younger up close, the girl who'd once slept in my bed after a nightmare and talked in her sleep about spelling bees. "I should have stopped him," she said. "I keep replaying it and thinking of all the ways I could have, I don't know, stood up." I shook my head. "You were managing a dozen fires. You put one out when it mattered." She chewed her lip. "I didn't know about the 28 jumps." "You didn't ask," I said, not as a blade, just as a fact. "But you can now." Her throat bobbed. "Will you tell me about one, not the scariest, the one that kept you going?" I thought about Kim's notebook, about Denham's dog, about a mango shared 5 ways. "Tell you later," I said. "After you're hitched. Save some good surprises for after." She nodded, relief loosening her shoulders. "Deal." She wiped the icing with a napkin, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. And if the words arrived late, they still landed where they were meant. Nate drifted over last, as if he knew to wait his turn. He looked like a man who'd hauled a boat across a gravel bar, tired in the honest way that follows a right choice. "How'd I do?" he asked, half smile, asking permission to exist. "You did the one true thing I said. That's plenty." He grinned, then grew serious. "For what it's worth, I didn't do it to get on your good side." "I know," I said, "but you're there anyway." He laughed under his breath, then sobered again. "You okay if I make one request?" "Go on." "At the wedding tomorrow, can we make space for quiet? No big speeches, just the kind of peace where folks can choose decency without being shoved." "Copy that," I said. "Old habits." He heard the soldier in it and saluted, not with his hand this time, but with the small bow of a man who'd learned respect the hard way. When they walked away, I was alone with the hum of the soda machine and the rasp of a push broom in a far hallway. That was when my father appeared as inevitable as gravity. He didn't clear his throat or scuff his boots. He just was the way he has always been in the rooms of my life, taking up more space than his body asks for. We stood without speaking. The fluorescent lights did nobody any favors. Up close, Dad looked older than he let himself be creases at the mouth that hadn't been there 10 years ago, accountant's eyes behind a foreman's squint. He slid his hands into his pockets and rocked heel to toe like a man on a pier testing a board. I suppose he said, finally, I'm the villain of the piece. I kept my face still. It wasn't a piece I said. It was a dinner. His jaw flexed. You always did get mighty literal when you were backed into a corner. I watched his mouth form words around a truth he didn't like. If I'd been crueler, I would have left. If I'd been softer, I would have smoothed the moment for him. I stayed where I was and let it be uncomfortable. I didn't mean it, he said after a beat. Not like it sounded. He huffed, irritation leaking. A joke's a joke, Sarah. Some jokes are 2x4s, I said. You can call them jokes while you swing. They still bruise. He stared at the soda machine like it might offer him a different daughter for $1.50. I worked hard for this family. He said, reflex more than argument. Long hours. Wet boots. No thanks. I know, I said. You changed my brake pads in the rain. He blinked, surprised by my memory of his memory. Well, he muttered, caught and irritated by being seen. He tried again. You didn't have to make a show of it. I didn't, I said. Nate did. He's an upstanding kid, Dad said grudgingly, like it hurt to have to admit a thing, and it hurt worse to keep it in. He shifted. That Cap fellow Bill, he had no right. Bill earned his right, I said, long before tonight. He flinched as if I'd swatted, and then something changed, small and human. His shoulders lost an inch of false height. His mouth softened to the shape that told the truth before his pride could sand it. I don't know how to talk to you, he said, and he said it like a confession, not a complaint. You come in here with sparkly bits on your chest, and he groped for words, and I don't know what any of them mean. I only know you weren't in my shop where I could teach you the things I know how to hand down. Feels like you left me. I made it a joke because the other thing felt like a crybaby thing to say. He looked as surprised as I felt to hear the thing laid out plain as boards. I didn't leave you, I said. I left the picture you were holding. It didn't fit me. We stood in that narrow piece where nobody wins and something better than winning gets a chance to breathe. I'm sorry, he said, and the words came out unvarnished ugly in their awkward honesty. I am. I nodded. Thank you, I said. I didn't make it grander than it was. Forgiveness isn't a parade. It's a door you oil and open and sometimes have to open again tomorrow. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried a different track. 28, huh? 28, I said. He jerked a thumb at the ceiling. Ever, land in a tree. Once, I said. Got acquainted with a pine in a personal way. That pulled a laugh out of him, genuine and short. He looked at the floor, then at me. I don't know what front and center means in that place. He nodded toward the fellowship hall, but I reckon I acted like the only center was me. You did, I said. Tonight it wasn't. He took that like medicine face, twisting, then smoothing. Tomorrow, he said, rough, I'll keep my mouth shut. Tomorrow, I said, you could also keep it open. Say something true. He hesitated, then nodded. Once a man agreeing to walk into a store he'd avoided for years because he didn't like the lighting. We left it there. He went to stack chairs, and I helped because life is mostly chairs and dishes and the small pride of making a room ready for morning. The wedding itself was simple and bright. Rebecca cried at the right time. Nate didn't faint. The flower girl forgot to scatter petals and then dumped them all at the groom's feet in a pink avalanche. During the reception, Dad found the mic cleared his throat and said, I ain't good with words. And the room smiled, knowing. But I've been a fool when I should have been a father. He looked at Rebecca, then at me. "I'm proud of both my girls," he said. And it wasn't poetry, but it was true, and the truth fit him better than swagger ever had. Bill shook my hand on the church steps and said, "All-American," and I answered airborne, and we both understood everything else we didn't have to say. Mom fixed my collar. Nate squeezed my fingers. Rebecca asked for the ditch story, and I told it. And for once, my family laughed with me instead of at me. On my last night of leave, I sat on the back steps with Mom and watched lightning bugs stitch green threads through the dark. Somewhere in town, a train sang the low song that's older than all of us. I felt the particular kind of quiet that follows being seen. Not applause, not a spotlight. Just the right weight of your own name in your own mouth. If you're listening to this and you carry an old bruise from a voice that should have been for you and wasn't, here's what I learned: you don't have to shout to set the record straight. Sometimes you wait on the light. Sometimes you let decent people do one true thing. And when the green shows you, step forward front and center, not to humiliate the one who hurt you, but to let the room choose respect over habit. If this story found you, pass it along to someone who needs a green light. Share it. Leave a note about who you salute. And if you'd like more small, stubborn American stories like this, subscribe and sit with us a while.